Dying CEO dies at ex-wife's door, gasping. You're my only hope. She holds his fate in her hands. As she pressed her ear to his chest, listening for his heartbeat, his cologne hit her, the same Tom Ford scent he'd worn since college. Her body betrayed her, responding to a scent that had once meant safety, passion, home. Even now, even after everything, her hands were steady on his chest, her fingers tracing patterns they remembered from countless nights when she'd fallen asleep to this same rhythm. Have you ever walked into a hospital and felt like you were stepping into a nightmare? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The king of Gulf investments was dying on a doorstep in suburban Austin, and the only woman who could save him was the one he destroyed a decade ago. Have you ever wondered what desperation looks like on a billionaire's face? Have you ever seen power reduced to nothing but gasping breath and trembling hands? Because on this cold November night in Texas, Richard Cole, the man who once controlled oil fields from Houston to Alaska, was about to show the world exactly what rock bottom looked like. But this isn't just about a man having a heart attack. This is about what happens when your past comes crawling back, literally begging for mercy from the person you betrayed most. November rain turned Austin streets into mirrors reflecting streetlights as the man who once owned governors clutched his chest on her welcome mat, designer suits soaked through like his carefully constructed world. Monica Harris stood in her doorway, bathrobe pulled tight, staring down at the ghost of her former life. You're my only hope, he wheezed, each word costing him precious oxygen. 10 years. 10 years since she'd thrown her wedding ring in his chest and walked away from the mansion, the money, the life that had slowly poisoned her soul. 10 years since she'd chosen dignity over diamonds. And here he was, the king of Gulf investments, reduced to begging on her modest front porch. Her neighbors started gathering. Mrs. Patterson from next door peeked through her blinds. The college kids across the street pulled out their phones. In minutes, this would be all over social media. Billionaire Richard Cole collapsed at his ex-wife's house. The same ex-wife he'd publicly humiliated during their divorce proceedings. Monica, please. His voice cracked like ice breaking. They're coming for her. Her blood went cold. Coming for who, Richard? But he was already losing consciousness, his expensive watch catching streetlight as his arm fell limp. She dropped to her knees beside him, muscle memory from their 20-year marriage kicking in. Her hands found his pulse, weak but steady. His skin felt clammy and cold, but underneath, she could feel the warmth that had once been her entire world. Call 911, she shouted to the gathering crowd, but her voice sounded far away, like it was coming from underwater. As she pressed her ear to his chest, listening for his heartbeat, his cologne hit her, the same Tom Ford scent he'd worn since college. Her body betrayed her, responding to a scent that had once meant safety, passion, home. Even now, even after everything, her hands were steady on his chest, her fingers tracing patterns they remembered from countless nights when she'd fallen asleep to this same rhythm. The ambulance sirens grew louder, but all Monica could hear was Richard's labored breathing and her own heart pounding. Whatever game he was playing, whatever brought him here, she was already caught in it. Because despite the affairs, the lies, the public betrayal, her hands were still gentle on his face, still checking for injuries like she gave a damn whether he lived or died. Before we continue with this story of power, betrayal, and second chances, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about love and forgiveness. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll question everything you believe about whether people can truly change. The paramedics arrived, professional and efficient, loading Richard onto a stretcher while Monica stood there in her bathrobe, suddenly aware that cameras were flashing. Tomorrow, her face would be in every tabloid in America. The woman who'd walked away from billions, now holding the hand of the man who destroyed her. "Are you his wife?" the paramedic asked, checking Richard's vitals. "Ex-wife," Monica corrected automatically. "Emergency contact?" She hesitated. After 10 years of silence, was she still his emergency contact? Did she want to be? "Ma'am, we need an answer." Yes, she heard herself saying. I'm his emergency contact. As the ambulance pulled away, Richard's eyes fluttered open just long enough to meet hers through the small window. His lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear but somehow understood. And then, as the red lights disappeared into the Austin night, Monica realized she was still wearing her wedding ring on a chain around her neck, hidden under her robe, but there, against her heart, where it had been for 10 years. But it was his final words, whispered as the ambulance sirens grew louder, that made her blood freeze and changed everything. They know about Sarah. They're coming for her. Sarah, the daughter they'd buried 15 years ago. The child whose funeral had broken them both beyond repair. The little girl whose death had turned their love into a weapon they used to destroy each other. Why was Richard talking about Sarah like she was still alive? In the chaos of the emergency room, she learned that some secrets are buried so deep, even a heart attack can't bring them to the surface. Have you ever walked into a hospital and felt like you were stepping into a nightmare? Have you ever had to make life or death decisions for someone who broke your heart? Because that's exactly where Monica found herself at 2 a.m., standing in St. David's Medical Center, still wearing her bathrobe under a hastily grabbed coat. The ER smelled of antiseptic and anxiety, monitors beeping like countdown timers while Monica sat in plastic chairs that had witnessed 1,000 family crises. Nurses moved with practiced urgency, but everything felt suspended in slow motion, like watching her life through water. Mrs. Cole, a doctor in scrubs approached, clipboard in hand. I'm not. Monica started, then stopped. What's his condition? Massive myocardial infarction. We've stabilized him, but the next 24 hours are critical. His previous medical records show a history of heart disease. Has he been taking his medications? Previous medical records? I wouldn't know. We've been divorced for 10 years. The doctor looked confused, glancing at his chart. But you're listed as his emergency contact, and as his medical power of attorney. Monica's world tilted. That's impossible. I never signed. The documents are dated 6 months ago, ma'am. Your signature is notarized. She stared at the paperwork, seeing her name in legal black and white, giving her the power to make decisions about Richard's life and death. Her signature looked real, but she'd never seen these papers before in her life. Can I see him? The ICU was quieter than the ER, but somehow more intense. Richard lay connected to machines that tracked every beat of his damaged heart, his face pale against white sheets. Without his usual armor of expensive suits and commanding presence, he looked smaller, vulnerable, human. Monica pulled a chair close to his bed, her eyes tracing the lines that hadn't been there during their marriage. Gray hair at his temples that had once been dark brown. New scars on his hand from God knows what kind of life he'd been living. She reached out, almost touching his face, then stopped. Even unconscious, he had this pull on her, this magnetic force that had drawn her in 25 years ago at the University of Texas. She'd been a scholarship student from Atlanta. He'd been old money from Dallas. She'd planned to be a lawyer. He'd been destined to run his father's oil empire. They'd met in a political science class, and within 6 months, she'd changed her entire life plan to fit into his world. Big mistake. Her phone buzzed with texts from friends who'd seen the news. Are you okay? Is Richard really dying? Are you getting back together? She turned it off. The last thing she needed was to explain why she was holding vigil for a man who cheated on her with half of Dallas. Monica, his voice was barely a whisper, but it sent electricity through her entire body. She'd forgotten how her name sounded in his voice, like a prayer and a promise wrapped in Southern charm. I'm here. The words came out softer than she intended. His eyes opened, finding hers immediately like he'd been searching for her, even in unconsciousness. You came. Don't read too much into it. I just didn't want her death on my conscience. A ghost of his old smile crossed his face. Still lying to yourself, I see. Don't, Richard. Just don't. He tried to sit up, wincing as monitors started beeping faster. Sarah is dead. The words came out harsher than she meant them to. We buried her 15 years ago. Remember? Car accident on I-35. Closed casket because there wasn't enough left to. She's alive. The words hung in the air like smoke. Monica felt her chair, felt the floor, felt reality shift beneath her. "What did you say?" "Sarah is alive, Monica. She's 28 years old. She's a pediatric nurse in Dallas, and she has no idea who she really is." The heart monitor's beeping got faster, but Monica couldn't tell if it was Richard's heart racing or her own. The room felt smaller, the walls closer, like the whole world was collapsing into this single moment. "That's impossible." I held her baby's shoes at the funeral. I picked out her headstone. I visit her grave every year on her birthday, and I had to protect you both. Protect us from what? Richard's eyes closed, and for a moment she thought he'd lost consciousness again. Then he spoke, voice barely audible. "For me, tell me in the comments, have you ever discovered a truth that completely changed your understanding of your past? Have you ever learned that your biggest tragedy might have been someone else's desperate attempt to save you?" Because Monica was about to learn that everything she'd mourned, everything she'd grieved, everything that had destroyed her marriage and her faith in love itself, had been a carefully constructed lie designed to keep her and her daughter alive. When the nurse handed her Richard's personal effects, the wedding ring she threw at him 10 years ago fell out of his wallet, scratched and worn like he'd been carrying her rejection as a reminder. But it wasn't the ring that made her knees buckle. It was the small photo tucked behind it. A recent photo of a young woman with Monica's eyes and Richard's stubborn chin, wearing scrubs and smiling at the camera. Their daughter, alive, grown up, beautiful, and completely unaware that her parents had been grieving her death for 15 years. The child she mourned for 15 years was alive, and the man she hated had been protecting her all along. What would you do if someone told you that your deepest grief was based on a lie? What would you do if you discovered that the child you'd buried was actually living just 2 hours away, completely unaware you existed? Because that's exactly what Monica faced as she stared at a photograph of her daughter, her living, breathing, grown-up daughter, while machines kept the man who'd orchestrated this deception alive in a hospital bed. The private investigator's office felt smaller than a confessional booth as photographs of a young woman, her daughter, spread across the desk like evidence of Richard's greatest deception. Monica's hand shook as she picked up each image. Sarah at the hospital where she worked, Sarah grocery shopping, Sarah laughing with friends at a coffee shop. "Her name is Elena Martinez now," the investigator explained, his voice professionally neutral. "She was placed in witness protection when she was 13. Complete identity change. New social security number, new birth certificate, new life. Witness protection from what? From Viktor Petrov and the Russian money that built your husband's empire." Monica's world cracked open like an egg. The oil deals that had made Richard billions, the investments that had funded their lifestyle, the money that had paid for their mansion and her jewelry and their daughter's private schools. It had all been dirty. Russian mob money, laundered through legitimate business deals. When Sarah turned 13, she started asking questions about the family business. Smart kid, noticed things didn't add up. Petrov got nervous, thought she might become a liability when she got older. So Richard faked her death. It was the only way to protect her. And you, Monica stood up, pacing the small office like a caged animal. "You let me plan a funeral for a living child. You let me pick out flowers for an empty coffin. You let me cry over a grave that meant nothing while she was out there needing her mother." The investigator shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Cole, your husband paid me to find you today because Petrov is back. The federal investigation into the oil deals is closing in, and Petrov thinks Sarah might testify about what she knew as a child. She doesn't know anything. She was 13. Petrov doesn't know that, and he's decided the safest option is to eliminate all potential witnesses, including Sarah, including all of you." Monica sank back in her chair, the full weight of Richard's deception finally clear. He hadn't destroyed their family out of cruelty or indifference. He'd sacrificed their marriage, her happiness, her mental health, and 15 years of their daughter's life to keep them breathing. Where is she? The address showed Sarah lived in Dallas, working at Children's Medical Center, living in a modest apartment under the name Elena Martinez. She'd put herself through nursing school, had no idea she was worth millions, had no idea her parents were alive and had been mourning her for 15 years. What does she think happened to us? Car accident when she was 13. She thinks you and Mr. Cole died in a crash, and she was placed with distant relatives who died when she aged out of the system. So Sarah had been mourning them too. While Monica had been visiting an empty grave in Austin, Sarah had been living in Dallas, believing her parents were dead, making her own way in the world with nothing but determination and a fake name. The drive to Dallas felt like traveling through time. Each mile brought Monica closer to the daughter she'd buried and further from the woman she'd been for the past 15 years. The woman who defined herself by loss, who'd built her identity around surviving tragedy, who convinced herself that loving Richard had been the mistake that destroyed everything. But what if loving Richard hadn't been the mistake? What if trusting him had been the only thing that kept their daughter alive? Children's Medical Center rose like a white fortress against the Dallas skyline. Monica parked across the street, hands trembling as she watched nurses come and go through the main entrance. Any one of them could be Sarah, Elena, her daughter, who wasn't dead. She didn't have to wait long. At 3:15 p.m., a young woman in blue scrubs emerged from the hospital, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her face a perfect blend of Monica's features and Richard's bone structure. She moved with purpose, confident strides that reminded Monica of herself at that age. But there was something else, something that made Monica's breath catch. Sarah had Richard's eyes, that intense green that had first attracted Monica in college. Monica fumbled for her phone, snapping photos through the windshield like a stalker. Her daughter, her baby girl, grown up and saving lives, completely unaware that her mother was watching from across the street with tears streaming down her face. Sarah climbed into a modest Honda Civic, not the luxury car she would have driven as Richard Cole's daughter, but a practical vehicle bought with money she'd earned herself. She'd built a life from nothing, just like Monica had after the divorce. Strong women, both of them. Survivors. What do you do when you want to run to your child, but know that seeing you might put her in more danger? What do you do when reunion might mean death? As Monica worked up courage to approach Sarah, she noticed the young woman wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit was watching from across the parking lot. And when he spotted Monica, he made a phone call that would change everything. Victor Petrov had found them first. She drove toward Dallas with revenge in her heart and her daughter's address in her trembling hands. Have you ever wanted revenge so badly you could taste it? Have you ever felt anger so pure it could power a small city? Because Monica was running on nothing but fury and determination as she drove back to Austin. Her daughter's face burned into her memory and Victor Petrov's threat echoing in her ears. Dallas skyline had risen before her like a mirage of possibility. Each mile bringing her closer to the daughter she'd mourned and the confrontation that would redefine her understanding of love and sacrifice. But now, racing back to Richard's hospital bed, she understood that seeing Sarah had put them all in more danger. Her phone rang as she hit I-35. Unknown number. Monica. The voice was accented, precise. Russian. Who is this? A friend of your husband's. We need to talk. I don't talk to strangers. You will talk to me. Because if you don't, the beautiful young nurse who just finished her shift at Children's Medical Center will have a very unfortunate accident on her drive home. Monica's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles went white. If you touch her, you'll what? Call the police? Tell them your daughter, who died 15 years ago, is actually alive and in danger from Russian investors? They'll think you're having a nervous breakdown. What do you want? The same thing I've always wanted. Return of my investment, with interest. Your husband borrowed $50 million to finance his first major oil acquisition. That money, with compound interest over 15 years, now totals $200 million. Richard doesn't have that kind of money anymore. The federal investigation froze his assets. Then I suggest you find another way to pay. You have 48 hours. The line went dead. Monica pulled over at a rest stop, her whole body shaking. The parking lot was full of normal people doing normal things. Families on road trips, truck drivers grabbing coffee, college students heading home for the weekend. None of them were racing against time to save their daughter from Russian mobsters. She opened her laptop and started researching everything she could find about Viktor Petrov. What she discovered made her blood run cold. This wasn't just some businessman seeking repayment. Petrov specialized in making people disappear. Witnesses, partners who became liabilities, anyone who threatened his operations. Richard's phone, the one the hospital had given her with his personal effects, started buzzing with old messages. She scrolled through, seeing a pattern that made her sick. For months, Richard had been trying to liquidate assets, sell properties, cash in investments. He'd been trying to raise the money to pay Petrov back. But it hadn't been enough. And now Petrov was done waiting. The old love letters were tucked between business documents in Richard's wallet. Letters he'd written but never sent, dated throughout their 10 years of separation. Her hands trembled as she read them in her car, engine running, emergency lights flashing. Monica, I dream about the way you used to laugh at my terrible jokes. I dream about Sunday mornings when we'd read the paper in bed and you'd steal the sports section just to annoy me. I dream about the woman I was when I was worthy of your love. I know you think I chose money over family, but every decision I made was about protecting you and Sarah. The oil deals, the Russian money, the fake death. It was all to keep you safe from a world that would have destroyed you both. I've never stopped wearing my wedding ring. It's in my wallet, right next to your picture, right next to Sarah's fake obituary that breaks my heart every time I see it. Reading his words in the parking lot, she felt her body respond despite her anger. Her chest tightened, her breathing quickened, her skin grew warm. Even now, even after everything, his words could affect her physically. The raw honesty, the pain he'd carried alone for 10 years, the love that had never died despite the lies that killed their marriage. She'd convinced herself that he'd been playing games, manipulating emotions, using her trauma to get what he wanted. But these letters weren't written for an audience. They were the private confessions of a man who'd sacrificed everything to protect his family and had been living with the consequences ever since. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, a photo of Sarah leaving the hospital, getting into her car, completely unaware she was being watched. The message was simple. TikTok. Drop a comment below. Have you ever had to choose between what you thought was right and what you knew was necessary? Have you ever discovered that someone you hated had been protecting you all along? As Monica sat in that parking lot, reading love letters from a man she'd spent 10 years trying to hate, she realized that everything she thought she knew about her marriage, her divorce, and her life had been wrong. Richard hadn't abandoned them. He'd saved them, and now it was her turn to save him. But first, she had to warn Sarah, even if it meant revealing the truth about everything. The hospital room felt different when she returned. Richard was awake, propped up against pillows, looking more alert than he had since his collapse. The monitors showed his heart rhythm was stronger, more stable. "You want to see her?" he said. It wasn't a question. "Petrov called me." Richard's face went pale. "What did he say?" $200 million. 48 hours. "I don't have that kind of money. The feds froze everything. Then we'll have to find another way." Richard stared at her. Monica moved her chair closer to his bed, close enough to smell his cologne on the hospital gown, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his green eyes that had always made her feel like she was drowning in the best possible way. "You should have told me the truth 15 years ago. You would have tried to stop me. You're damn right I would have. And Sarah would be dead." They stared at each other across 15 years of hurt and misunderstanding. Monica could feel the pull between them, the magnetic force that had never really gone away. Her body was responding to his proximity, her heart rate increasing, her skin warming. Even in a hospital room, surrounded by machines and monitors, she could feel the electricity that had always existed between them. "What's the plan?" she asked. As Monica reached for Richard's hand, their fingers intertwining like they had 1,000 times before, she realized she wasn't just choosing to help him. She was choosing to trust him. Again. And that was either the smartest thing she'd ever done or the mistake that would get them all killed. The bank transfer was processing when alarms started blaring throughout the hospital. Not medical emergency alarms, but the kind that meant someone unauthorized was in the building. Viktor Petrov was done waiting. The reunion she dreamed of for 15 years became a nightmare when she realized her daughter was still in danger. Have you ever had a moment where everything you thought you wanted suddenly became the thing you feared most? Have you ever realized that getting your heart's desire might be the thing that destroys everyone you love? Because Monica was about to learn that some reunions are worth waiting 15 years for, and others happen at exactly the wrong time. The hospital cafeteria buzzed with ordinary conversations about shifts and patience while Monica sat across from the daughter she'd buried, reality bending around them like heat waves. Sarah, Elena, had come as soon as Monica called, driving from Dallas in record time, her face a mixture of confusion and desperate hope. "You said on the phone that you knew my parents." Elena's voice was steady, professional, but Monica could see the little girl in her eyes, the child who'd once begged for bedtime stories and insisted on wearing princess dresses to the grocery store. "I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you, and I need you to stay calm." "Okay." But Elena's hands were trembling as she reached for her coffee cup. "Your name isn't Elena Martinez. It's Sarah Monica Cole. You're 28 years old, not 26, and your parents aren't dead." Elena set down her cup carefully, like she was handling explosives. "I think you might have me confused with. You have a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on your left shoulder blade. When you were 7, you broke your arm falling out of the oak tree in our backyard because you were trying to rescue a cat that wasn't even stuck. You're allergic to strawberries and shellfish. Your favorite book as a child was Matilda because you said she was smart enough to fix her own problems." Elena's face went white. "How do you?" "Because I'm your mother." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was about to consume everything. Elena stared at Monica, her green eyes, Richard's eyes, searching for truth in a face she'd forgotten but somehow recognized. "That's impossible. My parents died when I was 13. We faked our deaths to protect you, just like we faked yours to protect us." "Faked my..." Elena's voice broke. "I don't understand." Monica reached across the table, her fingers barely touching Elena's hand. The contact sent electricity through her entire body. This was her child, her baby, grown up and beautiful and alive. "Your father got involved with some dangerous people. Russian investors who didn't hesitate to hurt families to protect their interests. When you started asking questions about the business, they decided you were a liability. So you let me think you were dead for 15 years? We let you think we were dead so you could stay alive." Elena pulled her hand away, standing up so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. "This is insane. You're telling me my entire life is a lie. I'm telling you that your entire life was carefully constructed to keep you breathing." Other people in the cafeteria were starting to stare. Monica kept her voice low, urgent. "Elena, Sarah, I know this is overwhelming, but right now, we don't have time for you to process this. The man who wanted you dead 15 years ago knows you're alive, and he's coming for all of us. Why should I believe you?" Monica pulled out her phone, showing Elena the photo from Richard's wallet. A picture of the three of them from Sarah's 13th birthday, just days before the fake car accident. In the photo, Sarah was blowing out candles while Monica and Richard stood behind her, their faces glowing with love and pride. Elena stared at the photo, her breathing getting faster. "I remember that cake. Chocolate with strawberry frosting that I couldn't eat because of my allergies. But you made it anyway because the strawberry was so pretty. Because you wanted to look like a garden." "Oh my God." Elena sank back into her chair. "Oh my God, I'm really your mother. And the man in that hospital bed upstairs, fighting for his life, he's really your father. And he spent the last 15 years carrying the weight of this decision, knowing that keeping you safe meant losing you forever." Elena's hands were shaking as she touched her face, like she was trying to feel if she was real. "What happened to the people I thought were my family? There were no relatives. That was part of the cover story. You aged out of the system and made your own way because you're strong and brilliant and everything your father and I dreamed you'd become. I became a nurse because I wanted to save people, just like your father tried to save you." Elena looked up at Monica with tears in her eyes. "Can I see him?" Monica's heart broke and healed at the same time. After 15 years of separation, After all the lies and protection and sacrifice, her daughter wanted to see her father. There's something else you need to know. He's not well. He had a heart attack. And the stress of this situation. I'm a cardiac nurse. I can handle seeing sick people. Can you handle seeing your father dying? Elena took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders in a gesture that reminded Monica of herself. I've been handling things on my own for 15 years. I think I can manage one more impossible situation. You still love him? Elena observed as they walked toward the elevator, noticing the wedding ring on Monica's chain. It's complicated. No, it's not. You still love him, and he still loves you. That's why you're both here, isn't it? That's why you came when he collapsed. Why you believe him about me being alive. Why you're helping him even though he put you through hell. Monica pressed the elevator button, avoiding her daughter's eyes. Sometimes love isn't enough, and sometimes it's the only thing that matters. The elevator doors opened, and Elena stepped inside with the confidence of someone who belonged in hospitals. Monica watched her daughter, her living, breathing, incredible daughter, and realized that Sarah had grown into exactly the kind of woman Monica had hoped to raise. Strong, compassionate, unafraid of hard truths. Mom, Elena's voice was tentative, like she was testing the word. Yes. Whatever happens next, I'm glad you found me. Have you ever had someone call you by a name you thought you'd never hear again? Have you ever felt your heart restart after 15 years of being broken? Because as the elevator carried them toward Richard's room, Monica realized that no matter what Viktor Petrov had planned, no matter what dangers lay ahead, she had her daughter back. Sarah was alive, beautiful, grown into an incredible woman, and she'd called Monica Mom. Some things were worth dying for, but for the first time in 15 years, Monica had something worth living for, too. The elevator stopped at the cardiac floor, and Elena stepped out with the purposeful stride of a medical professional. But as they approached Richard's room, Monica noticed something that made her blood run cold. The security guard who should have been outside Richard's door was gone, and the man in the expensive suit standing at the nurse's station, asking questions about patient information, looked exactly like the photos she'd seen of Viktor Petrov. Elena, Monica whispered, grabbing her daughter's arm. We need to go. Now. But it was too late. Viktor turned, saw them both, and smiled like a predator who'd finally cornered his prey. Ms. Martinez, he said, using Elena's fake name like a weapon. Or should I say, Ms. Cole? We need to talk. Richard Cole had built his empire on calculated risks, but the biggest gamble of his life was betting that love could survive the truth. His hospital room looked nothing like the boardrooms where he'd negotiated billion-dollar deals. 4 tubes snaked around his arms while Monica sat beside his bed, laptop balanced on her knees, helping him navigate the financial warfare that would either save their family or destroy them completely. The Petrov Group invested $47 million in Gulf investments back in 2009, Richard explained, his voice hoarse from the medications. What I didn't know was that Viktor was washing money through legitimate oil deals. Monica's fingers paused over the keyboard. You're telling me you accidentally built your fortune on dirty money? Not accidentally. Richard's eyes met hers. I knew Viktor's money wasn't clean. I told myself I could use it for good, create jobs, build something legitimate. But dirty money stays dirty, no matter what you build with it. The laptop screen showed their assets. Properties in 6 states, investment portfolios worth hundreds of millions, oil rights that stretched across Texas and Oklahoma. All of it now at risk. Viktor wants his original investment back, plus compound interest, Richard continued. That's $200 million, Monica. Money that's now tied up in infrastructure, in companies that employ thousands of people. Monica studied the financial documents spread across his hospital bed. Her business degree had been gathering dust for years, but the numbers told a clear story. If you liquidate everything to pay him, you'll destroy the legitimate businesses you built. And if I don't pay him, he kills you and Sarah. Richard's hand found hers. That's not a choice I can live with. Outside, rain drummed against the hospital window. Monica remembered nights like this when they'd worked together on deals, her sharp mind complementing his bold instincts. They'd been unstoppable as partners, in business and in bed. "There has to be another way," she said, pulling up bank statements. "What about the offshore accounts? Frozen by federal investigation. The FBI's been watching my financials for months." Richard shifted uncomfortably. "Victor knows I'm trapped. That's why he's making his move now." Monica's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "On my way to see you both. Can't wait any longer." "She's coming here," Monica said. "We need to warn her about Victor." "No." Richard struggled to sit up straighter. "She can't be anywhere near this. Victor will use her against us. She's not a child anymore. Richard, she deserves to know what's happening." Their old dynamic was reasserting itself. Monica's protective instincts clashing with Richard's control. But this time, she wasn't backing down. "Look at these numbers," Monica said, pointing to the screen. "The oil futures contracts you signed last year. They're worth 40% more than when you bought them." Richard leaned closer, his shoulder brushing hers. Even in the sterile hospital environment, she caught the scent of his cologne clinging to his hospital gown. It triggered memories she'd spent years trying to suppress. Mornings when she'd wake up wrapped in sheets that smelled like him, nights when his hands had mapped every inch of her body. "The Gulf Platform 7 project," she continued, forcing herself to focus on the numbers. "It's producing twice what you projected. If we can get bridge financing." "From who?" "Every bank in Texas knows I'm under federal investigation." Monica's fingers flew over the keyboard, accessing databases she hadn't touched in a decade. "What about international markets? Swiss banks don't care about FBI investigations if the collateral is solid." Richard watched her work, admiration and regret warring in his expression. "Why are you helping me? After everything I've done?" Monica didn't look up from the screen. "Because Sarah needs her father alive. And because..." She paused, fingers hovering over the keys. "Because you're the only person who ever made me want to be better than I am." The words hung between them, an admission that changed everything. Richard's hand covered hers, stilling her typing. "Monica, I need you to know something. These past 10 years, every deal I made, every risk I took, I asked myself what you would do. Your voice has been in my head every single day." She finally met his eyes. "Then why didn't you come back sooner?" "Because I didn't think I deserved forgiveness. And because I was afraid that if I came back, I'd only hurt you again." The laptop chimed with an incoming message, a response from Credit Suisse, expressing interest in the oil platform collateral. Monica's heart raced, not from the business opportunity, but from the way Richard was looking at her. "There might be a way," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it means trusting me with everything. Your assets, your accounts, your future. I've trusted you with my life from the moment I collapsed on your doorstep." Monica began typing furiously, setting up the international transfer protocols that could free up enough cash to pay Victor while preserving the core of Richard's legitimate empire. As she worked, she felt Richard's eyes on her, felt the old electricity that had once made them invincible together. But their moment was shattered by alarms blaring throughout the hospital. Not the steady beeps of medical equipment, but the harsh, urgent sound that meant unauthorized personnel were in the building. Monica's blood turned to ice as she realized what was happening. Victor hadn't waited for their answer. The bank transfer was processing when the alarms started screaming, and somewhere in the corridors beyond Richard's room, footsteps echoed like countdown timers marking the end of their time. When Victor's men stormed the hospital, Monica realized that loving Richard Cole meant choosing between safety and loyalty. The hospital's lockdown system activated with mechanical precision, steel barriers sliding across windows, while automated voices announced code silver over the intercom. Monica's heart hammered as she watched the computer screen. Their transfer to Credit Suisse was only 60% complete. "How long until the money clears?" Richard asked, struggling to disconnect his 4 lines. 8 minutes, maybe 10. Monica's fingers flew over the keyboard, trying to expedite the process. "Richard, you can't get up. Your heart." "My heart will stop permanently if Victor gets to us first." Through the small window in the door, Monica saw hospital security moving through the corridor, their radios crackling with urgent communications. But Viktor Petrov hadn't built his reputation by being stopped by hospital guards. Richard's phone vibrated. The display showed an unknown international number. "Answer it," Monica said. "Put on speaker." Victor's accent carried through the phone like ice water. "Richard, my old friend, I trust you're feeling better." "What do you want, Victor?" "Well, I've always wanted. My money, $200 million, transferred to the accounts I specified. You have 1 hour." Monica leaned closer to the phone. "Victor, this is Monica Cole. The transfer is already processing. Give us 20 minutes. Victor's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Ah, the beautiful wife returns to save the day. How romantic. But I'm afraid 20 minutes is too long, Mrs. Cole. My men are already in your building." The lights in Richard's room flickered, then went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Monica could hear shouting from the floors below. "The backup generators will keep the computers running," she whispered to Richard. "But if they cut the internet connection, then we're dead," Richard finished. Monica grabbed her phone and called Sarah, praying she'd answer. It went straight to voicemail, which meant Sarah was already in the hospital, where cell service was always spotty. "She's here," Monica said. "We have to warn her." Richard was already moving, forcing himself out of bed despite the monitor lead still attached to his chest. "There's a service corridor behind the nurse's station. If we can reach it." The door to Richard's room burst open, but instead of Victor's men, it was Dr. Martinez, Sarah's supervisor from the cardiac unit. "Mr. and Mrs. Cole, we need to move you immediately. There are armed men in the main lobby demanding access to this floor." Monica grabbed the laptop while Richard steadied himself against the bed rail. "Doctor, is Sarah Martinez here tonight? She's in pediatric ICU, 3 floors up." "What? Those men aren't just here for us," Richard said grimly. "They're here for our daughter." Dr. Martinez's eyes widened. "Sarah's your daughter?" "It's complicated," Monica said. "Is there another way to reach the pediatric floor?" "Service elevator, but it requires a key card." Richard pulled a black credit card from his wallet, the kind only billionaires carried. "This should work on any electronic system in the hospital. I donated enough money to build a new cardiac wing." They moved quickly through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and fear. Monica's hand stayed on Richard's arm, steadying him while her eyes scanned for threats. The emergency lighting turned every shadow into a potential enemy. The service elevator was hidden behind a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Dr. Martinez's key card failed, but Richard's black card made the lock click open immediately. As the elevator climbed, Monica's laptop chimed. The transfer was 85% complete, but her phone was buzzing with text messages from news stations. Somehow, word of the hospital siege was already leaking to the media. Victor is using the media attention as cover, Richard realized. While everyone's focused on the lobby, his real team is coming up through service areas. The elevator stopped at the 3rd floor with a soft ding. Through the small window, Monica could see the pediatric ICU, soft lighting, and cartoon murals designed to comfort sick children. It seemed obscene that violence might intrude into this space. There, Dr. Martinez pointed to a figure in scrubs at the far end of the corridor. "That's Sarah." Monica's heart clenched seeing her daughter, their daughter, completely unaware of the danger closing in. Sarah was checking on a young patient, her movements efficient and caring. "We need to get her out without causing panic," Monica said. "If other families think there's a threat to their children." Richard was already moving, his banker's instincts kicking in. He approached Sarah casually, like a visiting family member. Monica watched through the glass as he spoke to their daughter, saw Sarah's face change from confusion to shock to fear. Then the main lights went out completely. Emergency power bathed the pediatric ICU in red light, while backup systems hummed to life. Monica's laptop screen dimmed, but kept running. The transfer was at 92%. Sarah was moving toward them, her face pale but determined. But behind her, Monica saw something that made her blood freeze. A man in a maintenance uniform walking purposefully through the pediatric ward, his hand inside his jacket. "Richard!" Monica whispered urgently. Behind Sarah. Maintenance uniform. Richard saw him too. Without hesitation, he stepped into the corridor and called out loudly, "Victor, I know you can hear me. Let's finish this like men, not in a children's hospital." The man in the maintenance uniform stopped and turned. Even in the dim emergency lighting, Monica could see Victor Petrov's cold smile. "Richard Cole," Victor called back. Always the dramatic gesture. "You have 3 minutes to complete that transfer, or I start with your daughter." Monica's laptop chimed one final time. Transfer complete. $200.3 million successfully moved to Credit Suisse account 4473829116. But through the pediatric ICU's main entrance, she could see Sarah's car in the parking lot below and more men in expensive suits surrounding it. Victor's voice crackled through the hospital's PA system, somehow having taken control of the communications. "You have 1 hour to transfer the money, or I start with your daughter." And through the window, Monica watched helplessly as Sarah walked directly into the trap they'd tried so hard to prevent. Some love stories end with a kiss, but theirs was about to end with a choice that would destroy one of them to save the other. The hospital parking garage had become an amphitheater of shadows where love and money would face off in a winner-take-all performance. Monica pressed her face against the cold window, watching their daughter walk unknowingly toward Victor's men stationed near her car. "The transfer went through," Monica said, showing Victor her laptop screen. $200 million, exactly as you demanded." Victor's smile never wavered. "Ah, but there's been a complication. My accountants discovered additional interest charges, inflation adjustments, the cost of my inconvenience." He shrugged. "The price is now $400 million. Richard's face went white. "That's impossible. I don't have $400 million liquid." "Then you'll sell everything. Houses, businesses, oil rights. Everything." Victor's eyes glittered in the emergency lighting. "Or I'll take your daughter as collateral until you do." Monica closed the laptop and stood up. Her hands weren't shaking. They were steady with the kind of calm that comes before doing something that terrifies you completely. "No," she said simply. Both men looked at her in surprise. No more games, no more threats, no more using Sarah as leverage. Monica walked toward the door. "You want someone to ensure Richard pays? Take me instead." "Monica, don't." Richard struggled to get up from his wheelchair. "This isn't your fight." She turned back to him, and for a moment, the years between them disappeared. "Yes, it is. It became my fight the minute you collapsed on my doorstep. It became my fight when I chose to help you instead of calling the police." Victor watched this exchange with the interest of a predator evaluating prey. How touching. "But what makes you think you're valuable enough to guarantee $400 million? "Because I'm the only person Richard Cole has ever loved more than money," Monica said. "And because I'm about to make this very public." She pulled out her phone and opened the camera app, pointing it at Victor. "Say hello to Facebook Live, Victor Petrov. Would you like to explain to my 3,000 followers why you're holding a children's hospital hostage?" Victor lunged for her phone, but Monica was already moving, live streaming as she backed toward the elevator. This is Monica Cole, broadcasting from Austin General Hospital, where Russian businessman Victor Petrov is threatening patients and families over a business dispute. "Turn that off," Victor snarled, but Monica kept filming. "My husband Richard Cole cooperated with federal authorities to expose money laundering operations. Now Victor Petrov is using terrorist tactics to recover funds that were never legally his." The viewer count on her live stream was climbing rapidly, dozens, then hundreds of people watching in real time. Comments poured in faster than she could read them, but she caught enough to know the story was spreading. Richard was trying to reach her, but his medical condition slowed him down. "Monica, stop. You don't know what he's capable of." "I know exactly what he's capable of," Monica said, still filming. "The question is whether he's stupid enough to commit crimes on camera in front of 1,000 witnesses." Victor's men looked uncomfortable now, glancing at each other as they realized their situation had changed dramatically. Hospital security was approaching from multiple directions, no longer facing an unknown threat, but responding to a live-streamed hostage situation. "You clever woman," Victor said, but his admiration was mixed with fury. "You think publicity will save you? I think transparency beats secrets every time." Monica lowered her phone, but kept the live stream running. Richard built his problems in darkness. Maybe it's time to solve them in daylight. She walked toward Victor, each step bringing her closer to the man who'd terrorized her family. But instead of fear, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: power. Not the kind Richard wielded through wealth and connections, but the power that comes from choosing truth over safety. "Here's my offer," she said. "Release my daughter. Release the hospital staff. Walk away from Richard's business permanently. In exchange, I'll come with you voluntarily as insurance while Richard liquidates enough legitimate assets to pay what you're actually owed, not your inflated demands, but what the original contract specified." Victor considered this, his cold eyes calculating the angles. Around them, hospital security was forming a perimeter, but Monica's livestream had changed the rules of engagement. Any violence will be witnessed by thousands of people in real time. And if Richard doesn't pay, then you'll have something worth more to him than money, Monica said simply. "You'll have me." Richard's voice broke through the tension. "No, Monica, I won't let you sacrifice yourself for my mistakes." She turned to him, this man who'd been her everything, who'd broken her heart, who'd brought danger to their door, but also brought their daughter back to life. "This isn't about your mistakes anymore. It's about our family's future." Before Victor could respond, the elevator opened and FBI agents poured into the corridor, their presence changing everything once again. But they weren't there to arrest a Russian oligarch. They had federal warrants with Richard Cole's name on them. "Mr. Cole," the lead agent announced, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering and failure to report suspicious financial transactions." Monica's live stream captured it all. Richard's shock, Victor's confusion, the moment when the hunter became the hunted. But as the handcuffs clicked around Richard's wrists, she realized that losing everything might have been the only way to win back what mattered most. Through the hospital window, she could see news vans already arriving, drawn by her viral live stream. The story would be everywhere within hours, but for the first time in a decade, it would be their story, told in their own words. As Richard was led away, he looked back at Monica and Sarah standing together for the first time in 15 years, and realized that losing his empire might be the price of winning back his family. The federal investigation that was meant to destroy Richard became the weapon that would save his family. News vans circled Austin General Hospital like vultures while inside. The king of Gulf investments signed papers that would dismantle his empire one asset at a time. Monica sat across from him in the hospital's conference room, which had been converted into a federal processing center for the night. Agent Patricia Reeves spread documents across the table with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Cole, your cooperation with our investigation into Viktor Petrov's organization has been noted. However, your involvement in money laundering activities still requires prosecution." Richard's hands shook slightly as he initialed each page. Monica watched him sign away properties, business interests, and investment portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The oil platforms that had made him famous, the downtown Austin skyscraper that bore his name, the ranch in Hill Country where they planned to raise children, all of it would be liquidated to pay restitution and fines. "What about Petrov?" Monica asked. "He threatened a hospital full of patients." "Mr. Petrov left the country 3 hours ago on a private jet," Agent Reeves replied. "But thanks to your live stream and Mr. Cole's financial records, we have enough evidence to issue international warrants. He'll never be able to enter the United States again." Monica's phone buzzed constantly with interview requests from reporters, but she ignored them all. Through the conference room window, she could see Sarah in the hospital cafeteria, still wearing her nursing scrubs, fielding calls from friends who'd seen the viral video of their family crisis playing out in real time. "The sentencing hearing is scheduled for next month," Agent Reeves continued. "Given your cooperation and the circumstances, you're looking at house arrest rather than federal prison. But you'll need someone to post bond and serve as your custodian." Richard's eyes met Monica's across the table. "I understand if you can't." "Yes," Monica interrupted. I'll post his bond. He can stay at my house during the proceedings." Agent Reeves raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Cole, are you certain? The media attention alone will be intense." Monica thought about the morning news shows that would want her story, the reporters who'd camp outside her modest Austin home, the neighbors who'd whisper about harboring a disgraced billionaire. Then she thought about Sarah, finally knowing the truth about her family, and Richard, who'd spent 10 years protecting them from his dangerous world. "I'm certain," she said. 3 hours later, Monica found herself in the strangest press conference of her life. The hospital's main lobby was packed with cameras and microphones, reporters shouting questions while she stood behind a podium with Sarah beside her. "Mrs. Cole, are you reconciling with your husband? Will you be profiting from his criminal activities? How do you respond to critics who say you're standing by a money launderer?" Monica looked out at the sea of faces, remembering the scared woman who'd opened her door to find Richard collapsed on her doorstep just days ago. That woman would never have imagined herself defending him publicly, let alone on national television. Richard Cole made serious mistakes. She began, her voice steady despite the cameras. He got involved with dangerous people and didn't ask the right questions about their money. But the man I married, the father of my child, is not a criminal mastermind. He's someone who built legitimate businesses that employ thousands of people, who donated millions to hospitals and schools, who tried to use dirty money to create something clean. A reporter in the front row raised her hand. "But Mrs. Cole, he lied to you about your daughter's death. How can you defend someone who put you through that kind of emotional trauma?" Monica's hand found Sarah's, squeezing tight, because protecting your family from killers isn't the same as betraying them. Richard made an impossible choice in an impossible situation. Was it the right choice? I don't know, but it kept our daughter alive. And now? Another reporter called out, "What happens to the Cole empire?" "The Cole empire is finished," Monica said simply. But the Cole family is just beginning again. After the press conference, Monica drove home through Austin streets that seemed different somehow, as if the city itself had changed in the few days since her quiet life had exploded into headlines. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, still processing everything she'd learned about her identity. "Mom," Sarah said finally, using the word naturally for the first time in 15 years. "Are you sure about letting Dad stay with us? It's going to be crazy." Monica pulled into her driveway, where Richard stood waiting with a federal ankle monitor and a single suitcase containing everything he owned now. Behind him, photographers snapped pictures from the street, but for once, Monica didn't care about the cameras. "Some decisions you make with your head," she told Sarah, "others you make with your heart. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, your heart makes the right choice even when your head thinks you're crazy." She got out of the car and walked toward the man who'd been her greatest love and her deepest pain. When she reached him, she straightened his tie, a gesture so intimate and familiar that the photographer's cameras clicked frantically to capture it. "Welcome home," she said quietly, meant only for his ears. That night, as Richard slept in her guest room and Sarah curled up on the couch watching late-night news coverage of their story, Monica lay in her own bed, listening to the sounds of her house, sheltering the family she'd thought was lost forever. Outside, reporters maintained their vigil, waiting for the next chapter of the story to unfold. But inside, in the quiet moments between the chaos, three people who'd been separated by secrets and lies were learning to be a family again. Monica had 48 hours to decide. Visit the man who destroyed her world, or let him face sentencing alone. The federal courthouse stood like a monument to judgment, while Monica climbed its steps, each one a choice between the past and an uncertain future. Media crews lined the sidewalks, their cameras tracking her movement as she entered the building where Richard's fate would be decided. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet conversation. Federal prosecutors sat at one table, their files organized with military precision. Richard's defense attorney, a public defender since his assets were frozen, shuffled through papers at another. And in the gallery, Monica recognized faces from their old life. Business associates, country club friends, people who'd once competed for invitations to Cole family parties. Most of them wouldn't meet her eyes now. "Mrs. Cole, The bailiff approached her. "Would you like to sit in the family section?" Monica looked at the front row, reserved for relatives of the accused. For a moment, she hesitated. Sitting there would be a public declaration of where her loyalty lay, broadcast on every news channel in Texas. "Yes," she said firmly. "Thank you." Richard turned when she took her seat, surprise and gratitude warring in his expression. He looked smaller in the defendant's chair, wearing a borrowed suit that didn't fit quite right. The Richard she'd married had commanded boardrooms and intimidated competitors. This man looked like what he was, someone who'd lost everything and was hoping for mercy. Judge Patricia Morales called the court to order. "We're here for the sentencing of Richard Samuel Cole, who has pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering and failure to report suspicious financial transactions." The prosecutor spoke first, outlining Richard's crimes with clinical precision. Mr. Cole knowingly accepted $47 million in funds that originated from illegal activities. His businesses served as vehicles for washing money that came from human trafficking, weapons dealing, and narcotics distribution. Monica's stomach clenched hearing it laid out so starkly. Whatever Richard's intentions, the money that built their comfortable life had financed terrible things. However, the prosecutor continued, Mr. Cole's cooperation led to the shutdown of a major money laundering network. His testimony provided crucial evidence that resulted in 37 arrests across 6 countries. Richard's attorney stood for the defense presentation. "Your Honor, my client was a victim of Victor Petrov's sophisticated operation. Mr. Cole believed he was participating in legitimate oil investment deals. When he discovered the truth, he immediately contacted federal authorities." Monica knew that wasn't entirely accurate. Richard had known Victor's money wasn't clean from the beginning, but she also knew he tried to use it for legitimate purposes, creating jobs and building real businesses. "Your Honor," the defense attorney continued, "I'd like to call Monica Cole to testify on behalf of the defendant's character." Monica's heart raced as she walked to the witness stand. She'd testified in business disputes before, but never with so much at stake. The courtroom fell silent as she raised her right hand and swore to tell the truth. "Mrs. Cole," Richard's attorney began, "you were married to the defendant for 12 years. Can you tell the court about his character during that time?" Monica looked out at the faces watching her, reporters with notebooks ready, former friends waiting to see if she'd stand by Richard or condemn him. Sarah in the back row offering silent support. "Richard Cole is the most driven person I've ever known," she began. "When he decided to build something, nothing could stop him. He worked 18-hour days, traveled constantly, missed birthdays and anniversaries because he was building an empire." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But he was also the man who bought a children's hospital a new pediatric wing because one child's story broke his heart. He was the man who quietly paid college tuition for every employee's child who wanted higher education. He made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but he never stopped trying to use his success to help people. Mrs. Cole, are you aware that your husband faked your daughter's death to protect her from associates of Victor Petrov?" "Yes," Monica said, her voice barely above a whisper. "How did that make you feel?" The courtroom was completely silent now. Monica could hear the scratch of reporters' pens, the hum of the air conditioning, her own heartbeat. "It destroyed me," she said honestly. "I planned a funeral for a living child. I grieved for 15 years for someone who was alive and safe. It was the cruelest thing anyone has ever done to me." She looked directly at Richard, seeing the pain in his eyes as she spoke. "But was also the most loving thing anyone has ever done for me," she continued. "Because the alternative wasn't just telling me the truth. The alternative was watching our daughter die for real. Richard chose to break my heart to save her life." When she stepped down from the witness stand, Monica walked past Richard's table. On impulse, she touched his shoulder, a brief contact that somehow conveyed forgiveness, support, and love all at once. Judge Morales deliberated for 20 minutes before returning with her decision. "Mr. Cole, your crimes were serious, but your cooperation was extraordinary. Given the testimony regarding your character and the fact that you've lost your entire fortune in restitution, This court sentences you to 2 years of house arrest, followed by 3 years of community service. The gavel came down with finality. Richard wouldn't be going to prison. But as Monica watched him being fitted with a GPS ankle monitor, she realized the hardest part wasn't the legal punishment. The hardest part would be learning to live together again, rebuilding trust one day at a time, while the whole world watched to see if their love story would have a happy ending. The courtroom where their love story almost ended became the place where it found a new beginning. Monica's modest Austin home had never housed a fallen king. But as Richard crossed the threshold in ankle monitor and borrowed clothes, it felt like sanctuary rather than exile. The media circus had followed them home. News vans lined the street. Reporters called out questions from behind police barriers. Helicopters circled overhead, capturing aerial footage of the disgraced billionaire's new address. "It's smaller than I remembered," Richard said quietly, looking around the living room where he'd once played with Sarah as a toddler. "It's bigger than a prison cell," Monica replied, setting his single suitcase down by the couch. "Which is where you'd be if things had gone differently." The house felt strange with him in it. For 10 years, it had been her space, decorated with her choices, organized around her routines, filled with the peace that came from not sharing your life with someone who carried the weight of empires on their shoulders. Now Richard's presence seemed to expand beyond his physical space, making everything feel smaller and more charged. Sarah arrived that evening with takeout from their favorite Thai restaurant. She'd taken a leave of absence from the hospital to process everything that had happened and to spend time with parents she was still learning to trust. "The reporters asked me about 20 questions just walking from my car to the front door," she said, unpacking containers of pad thai and green curry. "I told them our family doesn't comment on ongoing situations." "You handled that perfectly," Monica said, struck by how mature their daughter had become. Sarah had inherited Richard's quick thinking and Monica's steady composure. They ate dinner at the kitchen table that had seen thousands of Monica's solitary meals over the past decade. Now, with 3-place settings and conversation about Sarah's nursing career, it felt like the family dinners they'd never been able to have. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "I mean, practically speaking." Richard set down his fork. "I served my house arrest here for 2 years, assuming your mother can tolerate having me underfoot. Then 3 years of community service, which the judge specified should be healthcare related." He looked at Monica. "I'll understand if you change your mind. This is going to be difficult." Monica studied his face in the kitchen light. The stress of the past weeks had aged him, adding lines around his eyes and gray to his temples. But underneath the exhaustion, she could see traces of a young man she'd fallen in love with, someone with vision and drive, who'd simply gotten lost along the way. "The guest room has clean sheets," she said simply. "And I bought you some clothes in your size. Basic things, but better than wearing borrowed suits everywhere." That night, Monica lay in her bed, listening to unfamiliar sounds. Richard moving around in the guest room, the creak of floorboards under his weight, the sound of someone else breathing in her house. It should have felt intrusive, but instead, it felt like her home was finally complete again. She found him in the kitchen the next morning, attempting to make coffee with the complicated espresso machine Sarah had given her for Christmas. "It's not the same as your old setup," Monica said, showing him how to operate the grinder. "But it makes decent coffee." "Everything's different," Richard said, accepting the cup she handed him. "I used to have assistants to make coffee, drivers to take me places, people to handle every detail of daily life. Now, I can't even leave this house without permission." Monica sat across from him at the kitchen table, studying his face in the morning light. "Is that what you miss most? The convenience?" "No," Richard said quietly. "What I miss most is the sense that I was building something important, that all the risks and sacrifices meant something." "Maybe they still do," Monica said, "just differently than you planned." Their first week together established routines born of necessity. Monica worked from her home office, managing the small consulting business she'd built during their separation. Richard read extensively, business books, biographies of other fallen tycoons, novels Monica recommended. They took walks around the neighborhood, always followed at a distance by reporters, learning to ignore the cameras and conversations that stopped when they approached. The ankle monitor chafed against his skin, a constant reminder of his legal constraints. Some days, Monica caught him staring out the window with the trapped expression of a man accustomed to jets and boardrooms, now limited to a 3-bedroom house and a quarter-acre yard. "Regrets?" she asked one evening, finding him on the back porch watching the sunset. "About the crimes?" "Yes." "About cooperating with the FBI?" "No." Richard shifted in his chair, making room for her on the porch swing they'd installed together in the early days of their marriage. "About coming to your door that night?" Monica sat beside him, careful to maintain space between them. "What about it? I keep wondering if I should have just disappeared, gone to some non-extradition country, lived out my remaining years quietly, let you and Sarah continue your lives without dragging you into my mess. And now," Richard really looked at her for the first time in years. "Now I think maybe some messes are worth making if they bring you home." The words hung in the evening air between them, loaded with possibility and danger. Monica felt her heart respond despite her careful emotional barriers. "Richard," she said carefully, "we can't just pick up where we left off. Too much has happened." "I know," he said. "I'm not the same man who walked out of here 10 years ago. And you're not the same woman who let me go." Inside the house, Monica's phone was ringing. Probably another reporter, another interview request, another person who wanted to profit from their pain. But for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel compelled to answer it. "So what are we?" she asked. "Housemates? Co-parents? Something else?" "I don't know," Richard admitted. "But I'd like to find out." As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah appeared in the doorway with a manila envelope in her hands. "This came for you, Dad, from your lawyer." Richard opened the envelope with visible reluctance, pulling out legal documents that made his expression grow grave. Monica watched him read, noting the way his jaw tightened. "What is it?" "Papers from the federal court," Richard said quietly. "They want me to sign over the last of my assets, the wedding ring collection from my office, some artwork, a few personal items I thought they'd let me keep." He pulled a small velvet box from the envelope. Inside was the wedding ring Monica had thrown at him 10 years ago, the one she discovered in his wallet at the hospital, scratched and worn from years in his pocket. It looked like what it was, a token of love that had survived everything. "They're cataloging it as part of the asset forfeiture," Richard said, "unless someone claims it is sentimental rather than monetary value." Monica stared at the ring, remembering the day he'd put it on her finger, the day she'd thrown it back at him, all the years in between when she'd wondered what happened to it. "It has sentimental value," she said quietly. "To me." She took the ring from the box, feeling its familiar weight. Without thinking, she slipped it onto her finger, not her left ring finger, but her right hand, where it felt like a promise rather than a commitment. "Mom," Sarah's voice was soft with surprise. "It's not what you think," Monica said quickly. "I'm just keeping it safe." But as Richard's eyes met hers across the porch, she wondered if that was entirely true. Living under the same roof as your greatest heartbreak teaches you the difference between loving someone and being in love with them. Morning coffee became their neutral territory, steam rising between them like the ghosts of conversations they weren't ready to have. Monica established rules early. Richard would handle breakfast, she'd manage dinner. They'd split household duties like polite roommates rather than former spouses sharing space charged with history. But rules, she discovered, were easier to make than follow. "You still take your coffee black," Richard observed one morning, watching her pour from the pot he'd prepared. "Some things don't change," Monica replied, though they both knew most things had. Richard's community service assignment came through in the second week. Volunteer coordinator for the Austin General Hospital Cardiac Rehabilitation Program. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who'd nearly died of a heart attack would now help other heart patients recover. "It's actually perfect," Sarah said over dinner. "Dad understands what they're going through in a way most volunteers can't." Monica watched Richard's face as he talked about his first day at the hospital, noting how his eyes lit up when he described helping an elderly man learn to use the exercise equipment. For years, Richard had defined himself by what he owned, what he controlled, what he commanded. Now, he was discovering value in what he could give. The media attention gradually shifted from daily coverage to weekly check-ins, though photographers still lurked outside their house, hoping for dramatic photos. Monica learned to ignore them, but she noticed Richard struggled more with the public scrutiny. "I used to control my image," he admitted one evening, after a particularly unflattering photo ran in the Austin American-Statesman. Press releases, carefully staged interviews, professional photographers. Now, they catch me taking out the trash, and it's front-page news. "Welcome to normal life," Monica said, but not unkindly. "The rest of us have always lived without image consultants." Their biggest adjustment came from the forced proximity. Richard's ankle monitor meant he couldn't leave the house without advance permission from his parole officer, couldn't travel beyond a 2-mile radius without court approval. After decades of private jets and international business trips, he was learning to exist within the boundaries of Monica's quiet neighborhood. Some days, she found him staring out windows with the restless energy of a caged animal. Other days, he seemed genuinely content reading in the backyard or helping her with small home repairs. "I never noticed how many colors of green there are in your garden," he said one afternoon, kneeling beside her as she weeded the rose bushes she'd planted after their divorce. "You were never here long enough to notice," Monica replied, then immediately regretted the sharp edge in her voice. "No," Richard agreed quietly. "I wasn't." They worked in silence for a while, hands occasionally brushing as they reached for the same weeds. Monica tried to ignore the way her skin responded to even casual contact, the muscle memory that made her body remember what it felt like to be touched by him with intention rather than accident. The crisis came in week 3, when Richard collapsed in the kitchen while making dinner. Monica found him on the floor, conscious but pale, his hand pressed to his chest. "Call 911, he gasped, but Monica was already moving, checking his pulse, assessing his breathing, falling back on the emergency training she'd completed years ago. "Rate your pain, 1 to 10, she said, kneeling beside him. 7, maybe 8. His voice was tight with fear and pain. Monica made the call, then sat with him on the kitchen floor, monitoring his vital signs while they waited for paramedics. She found herself smoothing his hair back from his forehead, a gesture so natural she didn't realize she was doing it until his eyes met hers. "Don't you dare die in my kitchen," she said, trying for lightness, but hearing the tremor in her own voice. "Wouldn't dream of it," Richard managed. "Bad for property values." The paramedics determined it was a panic attack rather than another heart attack, brought on by stress and adjustment to his new medications. But as Monica rode with him to the hospital, the same hospital where their crisis had begun, she realized something had shifted between them. Sitting in the emergency room, holding his hand while doctors ran tests, she stopped thinking of him as her house guest or her legal obligation. Somewhere in the past 3 weeks, he'd become something more complicated. The person she was choosing to care for, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. "Monica," Richard said when they were alone in the examination room, "I need you to know something. These weeks in your house, they've been the happiest I've felt in 10 years. She looked at him lying on the hospital bed, vulnerable and honest in a way the Richard she'd married never learned to be. "Even with the ankle monitor? Even with reporters watching your every move?" "Especially because of those things," he said. "They've stripped away everything I used to hide behind. All the money and power and status, none of it matters now. All that's left is who I actually am and whether that's someone you could ever love again." Before Monica could respond, Sarah burst into the room, still in her scrubs from her shift upstairs. "Are you okay? They said you came in by ambulance." "I'm fine," Richard assured her. "Just my heart getting ahead of itself." Sarah looked between her parents, noting their joined hands, the way Monica's chair was pulled close to Richard's bed. "Maybe your heart knows something your head hasn't figured out yet." That night, back at home, Monica found herself checking on Richard every few hours, making sure his breathing was steady, that he was sleeping peacefully. It reminded her of checking on Sarah when she was a baby, the same protective instincts activated by love and fear in equal measure. Standing in his doorway at 2 in the morning, Watching him sleep, Monica finally admitted what she'd been fighting for weeks. She was still in love with Richard Cole. Not with his money or status or power, but with the man who made her coffee in the mornings and helped her weed the garden and worried about heart attack patients at the rehabilitation center. The question wasn't whether she loved him. The question was whether she was brave enough to trust him with her heart again. Monica thought the hardest choice was whether to save Richard, but the real question was whether to trust him with her heart again. The backyard garden where she'd planted roses after their divorce bloomed around them as they sat on the porch swing, 15 years of separation condensing into the space between their hands. It had been 2 months since Richard moved in, and their careful dance around each other was becoming harder to maintain. The federal monitoring ends next week, Richard said, touching his ankle monitor. I'll have more freedom to move around the city. Monica nodded, though the prospect of him having more independence stirred complicated emotions. Part of her had grown comfortable with knowing exactly where he was, with the forced intimacy of sharing space and routines. What will you do with the freedom? She asked. Find an apartment, probably. Get a job that pays actual money instead of community service hours. Richard paused, studying her profile in the evening light. Unless you prefer I stay. The question hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Monica had been expecting this conversation for weeks, dreading it and anticipating it in equal measure. Richard, we need to talk about what's happening here, she said carefully. Between us. What is happening between us? Monica turned to face him fully. We're falling back into old patterns. The easy intimacy, the way we work together, the way I catch myself watching you when you don't know I'm looking. And that's bad. It's dangerous, Monica said, because I can't tell if I'm responding to who you are now or to who you used to be. I can't tell if this is real or if it's just nostalgia and proximity and the drama of everything we've been through. Richard was quiet for a long moment, the swing creaking gently as he considered her words. Do you remember our first apartment? He asked finally. The place above the bakery on South First? What does that have to do with anything? You said something to me there during one of our first fights about money. You said you didn't care if I made millions or minimum wage, as long as I was honest about who I was and what I wanted. Monica remembered. They'd been arguing because Richard had taken a risky job with a startup oil company, choosing potential over security. She'd supported him then, believed in his vision even when others called him reckless. I was honest then, Richard continued. Completely honest about my ambitions, my fears, my love for you. And you loved me anyway. That was different. We were different. Were we? Or did we just get distracted by success and money and the life we thought we were supposed to want? Before Monica could answer, Sarah's car pulled into the driveway. Their daughter had been spending more time at the house lately, sometimes staying for dinner, sometimes just stopping by after work. Monica suspected Sarah was orchestrating these visits, trying to facilitate reconciliation between her parents. Don't answer that question now, Richard said quietly as Sarah approached the porch. But think about it. Sarah joined them on the porch with news that changed everything. I got the results back from Dad's genetic testing, she said, holding a manila envelope. The doctors wanted to check for hereditary heart conditions. Monica felt her stomach drop. What did they find? Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, Sarah said. It's a genetic condition that affects the heart muscle. Dad has it, which means there's a 50% chance I inherited it too. Richard's face went pale. Sarah, what does that mean for you? It means I need regular monitoring, lifestyle changes, possibly medication down the line. But Dad, it also means your heart attack wasn't just about stress and bad habits. Your heart has been working overtime for years, probably decades. Monica processed this information with a clinical detachment that helped her handle crisis situations. But underneath the practical considerations, a deeper fear was emerging. If Richard's heart condition was genetic and progressive, how much time did they have? How long? She asked Sarah directly. With proper treatment, what are we looking at? Sarah sat down on the porch steps, facing her parents. With medication and lifestyle changes, people with this condition can live normal lifespans. But Dad's case is advanced because it went undiagnosed for so long. So what you're telling us, Richard said slowly, is that I might have spent the last 10 years of my life chasing money instead of spending time with the people I love. What I'm telling you, Sarah replied, is that you have right now. Today. This moment. What you do with it is up to you. That night, Monica couldn't sleep. She found herself in the kitchen at midnight, making tea and thinking about time. How much they'd wasted, how much they might have left, how much they were wasting right now by being afraid to trust each other again. Richard appeared in the doorway, drawn by the light and the sound of her moving around. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "Too much to think about." He joined her at the kitchen table, accepting the cup of tea she offered. "Monica, I need to ask you something. I need you to be completely honest." She nodded, bracing herself. "If I only had 5 years left, would you spend them with me? Not as my caretaker or my legal obligation, but as my partner, as my wife." The question was so direct, so vulnerable, that Monica felt her carefully constructed emotional barriers cracking. "Richard, I know it's not fair to ask. I know I've put you through hell, and I know you have every right to protect yourself from more pain. Then why are you asking?" "Because I'd rather spend 5 honest years with you than 20 years pretending to be content with anyone else." Monica looked at this man who'd been her everything, who'd broken her heart, who'd brought chaos and danger and love back in her carefully ordered life. She thought about the genetic test results, about the uncertain future, about the choice between safety and happiness. "I don't know," she said finally, "but I'm willing to find out." Outside, rain began to fall in the garden that they'd been tending together, and Monica realized that some questions could only be answered by living them. In a cardiac unit, Monica learned that love isn't about second chances. It's about choosing each other every single day. The call came at 3 in the morning, jarring Monica from restless sleep. Richard's voice on the phone was strained, barely above a whisper. "Monica, I need help. Something's wrong with my chest." She found him in the guest room, sitting on the edge of the bed, his face gray with pain and his shirt soaked with sweat. This wasn't a panic attack. His lips had a blue tinge that made her blood turn to ice. "We're going to the hospital," she said, helping him stand. "Right now." "The ankle monitor," Richard protested weakly. "I need to call my parole officer." "The ankle monitor can go to hell," Monica said, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "You're having another heart attack." The drive to Austin General took 8 minutes, but it felt like hours. Monica kept glancing at Richard in the passenger seat, watching his breathing, talking to keep him conscious. By the time she pulled up to the emergency entrance, he was barely responsive. "I need help," she shouted as she burst through the doors. "Heart attack." The emergency room transformed into controlled chaos. Medical staff surrounded Richard's wheelchair, shouting numbers and medical terms while Monica tried to stay out of their way. Within minutes, he was on a gurney being rushed toward cardiac surgery. "Mrs. Cole," Dr. Peterson, the cardiac surgeon, approached her in the waiting room. "Your husband is in critical condition. The genetic cardiomyopathy has progressed faster than we anticipated. We're looking at emergency surgery to implant a device to help his heart function." Monica's hands shook as she signed consent forms. "What are his chances?" "With the surgery, good. Without it," Dr. Peterson didn't need to finish the sentence. Sarah arrived 20 minutes later, still in pajamas, her medical training taking over as she reviewed her father's chart with the cardiac team. Monica watched their daughter switch between professional mode and terrified child, strong one moment and breaking down the next. "Mom, they need someone to make decisions if Dad can't," Sarah said gently. "You're still his emergency contact." "I know, baby. I'll handle it." But as the hours stretched on, Monica realized she was facing choices no one should have to make. When Richard's blood pressure dropped dangerously low, the doctors asked about extraordinary measures. When complications arose during surgery, they needed permission to try experimental procedures. Each decision required her to choose between Richard's stated wishes to not be kept alive by machines and her desperate desire to keep him in the world at any cost. She found herself making choices based not on logic or legal documents, but on the simple fact that she wasn't ready to lose him again. "Mrs. Cole." Dr. Peterson emerged from surgery after 6 hours, his scrubs stained and his expression unreadable. The surgery was successful. We've implanted a left ventricular assist device that will help his heart pump more effectively. Is he going to be okay? The device has given him time. But Monica, I need you to understand, this condition is progressive. The device will help for a while, maybe years, but eventually, Monica nodded, not trusting her voice. She understood. They bought time, not a cure. In the cardiac ICU, Richard looked smaller than she'd ever seen him, connected to machines that beeped and hummed with electronic life. Monica took the chair beside his bed, prepared for another vigil. You can talk to him, the nurse said kindly. Patients in recovery often respond to familiar voices. Monica looked at Richard's face, peaceful in unconsciousness, and realized she had things to say that couldn't wait for him to wake up. I've been thinking about your question, she said quietly, taking his hand. About whether I'd spend 5 years with you, if that's all we had. A monitor beeped steadily, marking the rhythm of his assisted heart. The answer is yes, but not for the reason you think. Not because I feel sorry for you, or because I'm afraid of losing you, or because Sarah wants us back together. She squeezed his fingers, feeling for any response. I'll spend whatever time we have together because I choose you. Not the man you used to be, not the empire you built, not the perfect life we thought we wanted. I choose this Richard, the one who makes coffee in the morning and helps old men learn to walk again after heart attacks. The one who's learned that love matters more than money. The machines continued their electronic symphony, but Monica thought she felt the slightest pressure from his fingers. But when you wake up, we're doing this right. No more secrets, no more games, no more protecting each other from hard truths. If we're going to be together, it has to be completely honest, completely real. Sarah appeared in the doorway, carrying coffee and the kind of tired expression that comes from spending too many hours in hospitals. Any change? She asked. Not yet, but the monitors look stable. Sarah settled into the other chair, and they maintained their vigil together. At some point, Monica dozed off, her hand still holding Richard's, her head resting on the edge of his bed. She woke to the sensation of fingers stroking her hair. Richard's eyes were open, focused on her face with an expression of wonder and love that took her breath away. Did you mean it? He whispered, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube. What you said about choosing me. Monica sat up, suddenly wide awake. You heard that. Every word. Before she could respond, Richard's other hand moved weakly toward the bedside table, reaching for something. Sarah helped him retrieve a small velvet box, the same one that had held Monica's original wedding ring. Monica Cole, Richard said, his voice getting stronger. Will you marry me again? The question hung in the cardiac ICU, surrounded by the beeping of machines and the antiseptic smell of hospital air. But Monica looked into Richard's eyes and saw their future, however long or short it might be, stretching before them like a promise. Yes, she said simply, I will. And for the first time since this whole journey began, Monica felt like they were finally heading towards something instead of running from it. Some love stories end with I do, but theirs began again with I choose you, spoken in a hospital room where they'd almost lost everything. The small chapel at Austin General Hospital overflowed with people who'd watched their love story play out in headlines and heartbreak, but today the only audience that mattered was each other. Monica stood at the back of the chapel, wearing a simple blue dress that Sarah had helped her pick out, holding a bouquet of roses from her garden. You ready, Mom? Sarah asked, offering her arm since there was no father to walk Monica down the aisle. I've been ready for this for 25 years, Monica said. I just took the long way around. The chapel was nothing like the elaborate church wedding they'd had the first time, with its designer gown and 500 guests and reception that made society pages across Texas. This ceremony had maybe 50 people, nurses from the cardiac unit who'd grown fond of Richard during his recovery, neighbors from Monica Street who'd watched their story unfold, a few business associates who'd remained loyal through the scandal. Richard stood at the altar in a simple gray suit, the bulge of his cardiac device barely visible under his jacket. He lost weight during his recovery, but his eyes were brighter than Monica had seen them in years. Beside him, Dr. Peterson served as best man, having become both Richard's physician and unlikely friend. Judge Patricia Morales, who had sentenced Richard just months earlier, was officiating the ceremony at their request. "It seems fitting," she'd said, "to witness this new chapter after presiding over the end of the old one." As Monica walked down the aisle, she noticed the media presence was smaller this time. The initial scandal had faded into old news, replaced by other stories, other fallen powerful men. But she also noticed something else. The faces looking back at her were genuinely happy, not just curious. These people wanted this marriage to succeed. "Who gives this woman to be married?" Judge Morales asked, following traditional ceremony structure. "She gives herself," Sarah said firmly, "as she always has." The words Monica had written for her vows were forgotten the moment she took Richard's hands. Instead, she spoke from her heart. "Richard, the first time we got married, I promised to love you for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health." I had no idea how much those words would be tested. A ripple of gentle laughter moved through the chapel. "We've been richer than we ever dreamed and poorer than we ever feared. We've been sick in body and heart, and we found healing in places we didn't expect." She looked into his eyes, seeing the young man who'd promised her the world and the older man who'd learned that love was the only empire worth building. "Today, I'm not promising to love you despite our past. I'm promising to love you because of it. Every mistake, every betrayal, every moment of pain led us to this moment of choice." Richard's vows were simpler, but no less powerful. "Monica, I spent years trying to give you everything I thought you wanted. I built companies and bought houses and accumulated wealth, thinking that was how I showed love." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "What I learned too late is that love isn't what you build for someone. It's what you build with someone. Today, I promise to build a life with you, not for you. To choose you every day, not just today." Judge Morales smiled as she prepared for the ring exchange. The rings were new. Simple gold bands they'd picked out together, without the elaborate diamonds and designer settings of their first marriage. "These rings represent your commitment to this new beginning," the judge said. "Richard, do you take Monica to be your wife, to love and cherish, in whatever time you're given together?" "Ido." "Monica, do you take Richard to be your husband, to love and support, through whatever challenges lie ahead?" "Ido." "Then by the power vested in me by the state of Texas, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Again, the kiss was soft, tentative at first, then deeper as years of separation and pain dissolved into this moment of choosing each other. The chapel erupted in applause and cheers, but Monica barely heard it. All she could focus on was Richard's hands on her face, his lips on hers, the way this felt both entirely new and completely familiar. The reception was held in Monica's backyard, transformed with white lights and flowers into something magical. Sarah had coordinated everything, determined to give her parents the celebration they deserved. As the sun set over Austin, Monica found herself dancing with her husband in the garden where they'd sat on the porch swing months earlier, afraid to trust each other with their hearts. "Any regrets?" Richard asked as they swayed to music played by a quartet of nurses from the cardiac unit. "Only that it took us so long to get here," Monica said. "Maybe we needed the long way around. Maybe we needed to lose everything to find what really mattered." Later that night, after the guests had gone home and Sarah had finished cleaning up, Monica and Richard stood in their bedroom. No longer the guest room, but the master bedroom they would now share. The intimacy felt both natural and new, like returning to a home that had been redecorated in your absence. Richard's hands were gentle as he helped her out of her wedding dress, his touch reverent and careful. When they made love that night, it was with the passion of people who'd fought for each other and won, their bodies celebrating not just desire but survival, not just attraction but choice. Afterwards, lying in Richard's arms, Monica felt the steady rhythm of his assisted heart against her chest and realized something profound. They weren't the same people who'd fallen in love 25 years ago. They weren't even the same people who'd divorced 10 years ago. They were who they'd become through loss and pain and the decision to trust love one more time. Outside their window, Austin slept peacefully, unaware that two people who'd made headlines for their spectacular failure were now writing a quieter story about second chances and the courage it takes to choose love when love has already broken your heart. Their empire was gone, but their kingdom, built on truth and tested by fire, was just beginning.